Hi, folks. Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So, 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean.
Thanks for joining us. So, Scott, I'd love to hear about your background and how you got involved in complementary currencies.
Well, I actually grew up in the South. I was raised in northern Alabama, and I went to the University of Alabama, and I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I just asked a very simple question. Why is there so much suffering? Why are there so many people who go without while we have other people who are fabulously wealthy and have more wealth than they could spend in 10 lifetimes? And that began a process of inquiry for me that took me across disciplines and into an interdisciplinary degree program where I ended up titling my degree in political economics. I learned over the course of that degree about how America primarily has used banking and financial policy to extract huge amounts of wealth out of other countries, how we created what's known as the American Empire, And I started to ask the question of okay, well, if John Perkins says he's an economic hitman, if that's how you can assassinate a country using economic policy, then what's the opposite of that? What is it that helps a country come together with its people and its resources and lift themselves to a higher quality of life? And around the time I graduated, it was 2008, all of the fallout was really just beginning. And we were, watching people getting kicked out of their homes and all kinds of horrific things that were a result of pretty much, a gambling addiction on Wall Street. And that didn't make any sense to me. And I said, what can I do right now to organize whatever community I'm living in? Because I didn't know where I would end up. I ended up in Fairfield, Iowa. What can I do with that community to help protect them against this kind of thing happening again? And so local currencies ended up being my point of arrival. That's how I got there. I took a little detour into, gold and silver and commodity monies, the same kind of value set that drives political libertarian leanings, and also is really what drives Bitcoin. But that wasn't the answer, because if you're poor, you don't have money to buy gold or silver or any of that stuff. So we needed something that people could create on their own. And that was where community currencies had something to offer that things like Bitcoin didn't.
How would people go about creating their own credit or their own currency? How does this work?
Well, it's actually gotten much simpler than it has been. And this has to do with some of the new technology that's coming out. I mean, we're really getting the benefit of living in the time period when the rate of change itself is increasing. So Whereas before, even in the 90s, like with the Ithaca Hours here in Ithaca, you had to bring together a group of people and sit around a kitchen table or a conference room table or whatever and work through all of the mechanics around what was this currency going to be, how is it going to operate, like how is it denominated, asking yourselves all the questions, which really you still do these days, but the infrastructure is available much more readily now, where you can have a lot of those answers given to you from the outset. So instead of having to worry about how to create the currency itself, you focus on delivering a marketplace that's kind of the container for economic activity that supports a given thing. And that thing can be the local community. It can be a certain value set like local food. So that's the good news in that regard. So it's not like everyone who heads out on this quest has to go through the kind of grueling process of discovery and learning this pretty long process of nailing down what the currency is going to be. So really, you want to figure out what your reason for having this is. You want to find out what that primary outcome is that you're after in having the currency exist. So if you can identify the metrics that you're looking to serve through this unit, it starts to simplify which models will make sense. So, but primarily we're seeing three main models, maybe four, come into existence. Some that are social, that focus on weaving together the community social fabric. Some that are environmentally oriented, getting people to be more socially conscious and responsible consumers, taking public transit, so on and so forth. And others are purely commercial focused. Either you've got a traditional barter currency that is like a network of businesses that are trading with one another, to currencies that operate just to keep business on Main Street. Now, each of these can serve the others' outcomes and metrics. It's not like they're mutually exclusive. It's just a matter of what's your primary driver for having this model. That's the first question. The second question is, based on that understanding, what is the unit? How is it going to be valued in terms of its denominations? Is this going to be a time-based currency? Are we going to call it hours? Are they going to be time credits? Something else? Is it going to be a market-based currency, one for one with the national currency? Or is this going to have its own unit of value? The program that we did out in Iowa had a currency that we called the merit. And the merit didn't have a US dollar value until it had been redeemed and taken out of circulation. And that was interesting. And then you've got things like Bitcoin, which you have a cap on how many there will be, and therefore there's this scarcity aspect, and then you can play that against market currencies, and we see all the speculation that's happening with it as well. But it's meant to be its own kind of unit of account or store of value.
I'm wondering if you can just kind of weave into this description what you've done with Ithacash.
Right, yeah. So with Ithacash, the primary focus is to keep business happening in and around Ithaca and Tompkins County. We wanted to just keep it very simple for people. You really want to save people from as much thinking as possible. Just because using a different kind of money can be confusing in and of itself, you don't want to throw too many curveballs at folks. So we have the Ithaca dollar as our currency, which is one for one with the US dollar. The Ithaca hour, which is our predecessor, was designed as a time currency, but then when they wanted to have goods in the system, they said, okay, 1 hour is worth 10 US dollars. And that made some sense, and it allowed for people to use hours for goods, so they achieved that, but it came at the cost of causing a lot of confusion around the nature of the currency. Was it a time-based currency, or was it $10? Mm-hmm. And that had some negative effects, and also just generally kind of added some confusion that I think held it back a little bit, actually. So if you're going to do a market-based currency, it's advisable to have a parity that's just one-to-one with the national currency, or to do something like it's worth 1 cent, so that people would very easily make conversions.
Okay.
We also focused, and this is a question people have to ask, how are people going to use the currency? Are you going to have physically printed notes? Is it going to be an app? Or will you do something like SMS, text-based messaging transactions? And that's what we decided to do. Was we had a web platform, some open source software called Cyclos. That's CYCLOS.org, if people are curious. We configured that to operate on a one-to-one basis with the US dollar, and we connected a third-party SMS gateway so that people could make and take payments through text messages. And that was actually a hit. It's universally accessible. If you've got a cell phone and you can text, then you can use this system. You really don't even have to log in to our online thing. You just get your phone linked up and it's good to go.
And so that's how most of the transactions are running on Ithacash currently?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm guesstimating here, but I believe we see anywhere from 20 to 40 transactions a day.
Great.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can mention why you use the term complementary currency instead of alternative currency or local currency.
Yeah. There's a whole host of words you can use. Alternative, local, regional, cooperative, transition currencies, barter currencies, all kinds of stuff. Social currencies, and some of those, it's taken a while even for the community itself to work its way around that, all the vernacular, and figure out what words are positioned relative to what. But I avoid the word alternative currency simply because alternative seems to imply that you're going to try and replace the US dollar. And, I really think that that's just too much for most people to think of, at least for this. Now Bitcoin, somebody could talk about Bitcoin and they will refer to it as an alternative currency. I like complementary because it talks about it operating in tandem too, along with national currency, instead of trying to replace it, which I think sets up an antagonistic kind of relationship. And then people also kind of get this like, okay, you're trying to be subversive and get out of paying taxes and all that. And it's like, no, that's not what this is about. This is just about having another channel that we can go to exchange locally produced goods and services, when that's a thing that would be beneficial. So just opening up these avenues is valuable. And I like the word complementary just because it says it's a helper. And so I think it's the most appropriate. I also like cooperative, but then, if you're not a legal cooperative, people could get the wrong idea, but I mean, it is also a cooperative currency. I just try to use the ones that are most encompassing, and I'm also generally a stickler for using the right word for things. So, if I'm talking about a system that serves local, I'll say local. If I'm talking about a system that's about the social fabric, I'll say social.
Great. So, and you mentioned Ithacash is 40 transactions a day. Is this a good volume? Are you like, what are your goals or targets? How will you know if Ithacash is, a successful complementary currency?
Oh, it's a really great question. We filed a benefit corporation when we created an entity for Ithacash. We haven't gone through the official certification process yet, but we will do that as soon as we really can. So we want to have a whole host of metrics that we're looking at in terms of the social and environmental outcomes, as well as commercial outcomes that are coming out of this program as a whole, because our approach here is kind of a hybrid model. If there were one other model I could point to that we're emulating, I would say it's the Salmon Dune program in the south of the Netherlands. And that's a coin operated program. Coins, QOIN. They're an organization out of Amsterdam that specializes in these kinds of currencies and technology that supports them. But in terms of core metric, you do want to look at kind of your transaction volume and specifically your monetary velocity. And so this is not a metric or term that most people hear in the course of even, watching the financial shows on the news. But the velocity of money is how quickly money moves through the economy in helping people exchange goods and services. And so, and it's kind of funny, goods and services flow one way and money flows the other. So in any case, it's really a metric that measures how many exchanges one of your units is party to in the course of a year, typically.
Huh.
So you look at the total amount of currency that you have in supply, and then you look at how much income is generated in that currency, and then you can figure out your velocity. But you can go look it up at the St. Louis Fed, and most people don't even know. Like if you go to look up charts, right? Most of it's totally unintelligible for somebody without at least a master's degree in economics, right? You don't need that. You just need to know what certain things are. And so which kind of money you want to look for is M2. All right, M2 is the money you've got, like M0, M1, M2, M3, and that's all the different ways of measuring the volume of money that's out there. Now, certain types of money are stored in investments and all kinds of other stuff, and Wall Street accounts and whatnot. The money that you and I, as the plain folk, have access to is really the M2 money stock. And so that's the one that you'd want to go look up, is M2 money stock velocity. So that, that's really where you can kind of see the mega trend of, consumption in the economy, whatever, like how many people are spending, not how many people, but how much spending is there relative to what's happened in the past. And at 2008, you can see we fall off a cliff. It's this huge drop, and everybody, in their gut remembers what that felt like. And what's freaky is that, we have not rebounded from that. We're still down lower than we were, much lower, like I said, all-time historical low in terms of the money that's on the street and how fast it's moving around. We don't know how much lower that can really go, but it can go lower. We're at 1.48 now. Not that that number means anything outside of seeing the chart, but now the US dollar is actually at an all-time historical low in terms of its velocity. If we hit another crash event, we're running really, really, really close here. So having these kinds of currencies that are geared for a higher velocity, so they can go and facilitate 10 times as many transactions in the course of a year than an equal number of dollars could, that's huge. So these things are hugely useful in helping allocate goods and services on the local level, and they can also drive, increases in sales taxes and other local taxes that go to schools and other things that we need done here on the ground.
So this is fascinating. So are we actually seeing this higher velocity of money in the local and complementary currencies?
We are, not in every case. I mean, this is like the primary measure of the success of the system. So it's like if the system managers know what they're doing and they are responsibly managing the money supply, then yes. But ultimately what this is about is being a matchmaker between goods and services, which is why the marketplace space is so ripe for complementary currencies, is because we are both looking to accomplish the same end, and when it's combined, you see a factor of 10 improvement in terms of the amount of transacting that you can do. Just simply because people have goods, people have services, they're making offers, and there are plenty of people who want to buy those things. The only missing ingredient is the money. We're all broke. Right. And when you look at some of the statistics around, the percentage of the population that has less than $1,000 to its name is like over 50%. And then you've got a significantly higher percentage that, if they had to muster $600 for a surprise bill, it would put them under, financially. So people are really just holding on by the skin of their teeth. They're living to paycheck if they're not already in poverty or deep poverty. So, we really have to reverse the trend. And this is why you're seeing these huge movement around Bernie Sanders as this anti-establishment, anti-wealth concentration candidate, because we just literally have nothing left. Again, these complementary currencies are powerful because we can deploy them. We can implement these things for ourselves without having to go asking for permission to any of the existing power structure. There's no gatekeepers that we have to deal with here. Now, you're going to want to make value propositions to some of them and work in partnership. You want to have a banking partner, you want to be working with government, but you don't necessarily need their permission to get one of these things going and start helping people get things they want and need.
Okay, so the need is clear. This is a clear solution set that could make a difference. How are we doing on traction in terms of, the U.S. economy? What are we looking for? A percentage of transactions that are going on this kind of side channel? I'm kind of curious how it's actually happening, and if you have some examples of success that you can share with us, we can see that it's working somewhere.
Great, yeah. So the good news is that these things have been operating now for decades. I mean, these systems are very, very old. They go back millennia, because we didn't have national currencies. The way that history has come to what it is today is a very fascinating story, and there's a number of great documentaries that are out there. I prefer Money and Life. I find that one's really great. It's on YouTube. And then, there's other really good ones out there. If I could plug just one other, it would definitely be The Big Short.
Oh, that was great.
What happened with the banking collapse, right? So really great movie there. But we do have a long history established of these programs operating typically in other places around the world, all right? But Ithaca Hours is on that list, I would say, of, the highlights, at least here in the US. I would say the most powerful case examples are probably the Swiss Wir Bank. That's WIR Bank. That is a mutual credit barter currency that around, I think, 80,000 businesses use. And there is data that demonstrates that when the macroeconomy tanks or heads into trouble, that WIR usage heads up. And so you're just seeing people who need to get business done just move into a plan B currency, and the plan A currency tightens up. This is a very simple concept. And I think later on in history, we will just kind of gawk at how foolish it was to have all of our resources running through just these very few channels, and how, so much damage was done whenever the system became overburdened. It just doesn't make sense to operate in the way that we are right now. And then we've also got a really great case example from the city of Curitiba in Brazil. This one is a great example of just some innovative thinking, but it ended up being a great example of a social currency model. The mayor there, he ends up winning some awards from the UN for sustainable city design for these programs. But what they did was they had the slums around the outside of the city where there was trash that just covered the hillsides. It was making people sick, and the roads weren't wide enough for the trash collection trucks to get back there and collect the trash. Meanwhile, the city has this underutilized bus system. And so the guy gets the idea to give people bus tokens for pre-sorted bags of trash. And what you saw was the kids would go and pick up all the trash and turn it in for the bus tokens, and they'd give the bus tokens to their parents, who could take the bus down to the city and get a job and raise the household income. And the program worked so well that they recreated it for fishermen in the bay. They had a bunch of trash that was in the bay, and so if the fishermen went out and caught fish, they kept the fish. If you go and catch trash, you get bus tokens. And then they also did it for, they did boxes of food for keeping your kid in school. You got like a CSA share if your child had met certain attendance requirements. So all total, the household incomes in Curitiba were like 140% of any of the neighboring regions or areas. That's pretty significant. So these are two examples of what happens when you're operating really at scale. Modern examples, we've got a great situation going on in Bristol in the UK. You got the Bristol pounds there, as well as the Brixton pounds in London. David Bowie is on their Brixton pound 10 note, which is kind of cool. And there in Bristol, you've got the mayor who's been a total champion. He's been willing to accept his mayoral salary in Bristol pounds, which opened up ways for the city council there to accept Bristol pounds as some of their fees when they help businesses and do other things. Here in the US, we're behind the curve, and this is where I'm really excited because we get to say, look, like these are proven models. They're doing it over there. Why the heck shouldn't we be doing it over here? We have the same needs. Let's get going on this. You do see a lot of interest around the blockchain and Bitcoin, but I think by and large that is mainly at this point looking at it from a place of profit interest. How can we use this for the banks or whatever other industries? And we really shouldn't just let them run off with it. The blockchain is a very powerful technology, and it's not like they're going to be able to enclose it, unless they can, pass some very severe regulations around people using it. But that doesn't really seem feasible. So, we are looking at a good history of programs with varying degrees of success. A lot of them fail, primarily from a lack of funding. But we also have models that are great case examples of what happens when you have that funding, you've got the proper level of staff, you've got the proper marketing campaigns, and you've got the large partnerships and community that help these things deliver on their promises. So that's encouraging.
Well, thanks, Scott. Yeah, it's helpful to hear some of the other instances around the world where this is working. And then, of course, hearing that the United States is behind the curve is not too much of a surprise. And you mentioned a couple of things, but I'm curious if you can elaborate, how can we scale this up? And, what might be some of the barriers? You mentioned partnerships, what can we do? Because, I'm with you. We need to flip the script here and create a system that works for everybody. And so how do we do that in as short a time as possible, right?
Yeah. Spent a lot of time thinking about just that. The key for scale, I think we've got a couple of things that we're going to need. One is technology that is easy to configure and deploy, right? Creating a currency shouldn't be as complicated as it has been. And it already is no longer that complicated. We can create a marketplace that uses one of these currencies in a very short amount of time, and create the organization. Having a game plan or a playbook rather for how to create the organization, the kinds of strategic advice that you need to understand how to position these things and how to talk about them. We're also going to need funding, frankly. We need to see more money moving into this direction. And it's kind of a counterintuitive thing. It's like, okay, you're telling me I need to take real money and put it into this funny money stuff. And it's like, until we can get over that perceptual barrier and start focusing on the benefits that these things generate in terms of hard metrics, that will still be a challenge. We do have a lot of progress that's been made on those points through the CCIA program in the EU. It was called Community Currencies in Action, and the EU actually provided a few million euro for funding a number of programs. So we have some really great documentation that was delivered on these things from a very high level. Those were finalized in June. But the key for taking this to scale, in my opinion, is not only having the software out there, but also having the know-how readily accessible and creating a community of practice around how to bring these things and how to do the organizing, how to have the conversations, these kinds of things. Because, people run into the same questions, they have the same challenges. There are known issues when it comes to operating these kinds of currencies, namely that it can be very easy to accumulate a good number of them and then more difficult to spend them than cash. So that's something we're spending a lot of time addressing on the ground. But I think the key is also interoperability. We need to have an intersection where these different currencies can come together and meet so that you can do intertrading from one system to another. And so I'm in Ithaca, you're in the Hudson Valley, but we actually have sister systems. So I can bring Ithaca dollars over there to you and spend them at Hudson Valley Current merchants. And Hudson Valley Current account holders can come to Ithaca and spend their currents here at Ithaca dollar merchants. Yeah. So those kinds of connections are already starting to happen. We've already seen large aggregations of those kinds of networks within the barter industry, especially. Also, time banking, given that typically the unit is 1 unit per hour as a pretty consistent thing, already has a global network of time banks that are allied. Now we need to start seeing that global network of time banks and the global network of barter and the global network of cryptocurrency all coming together into like this intersection that I was talking about.
Wow, wonderful. Um, Anything else you'd like to share with us on kind of like, the future of money? Where do you see this going?
I mean, I think we've covered a lot of the core topics here, Sean. What we're going through is kind of like the shift from watching TV in black and white to watching it in Technicolor. There's just a lot more dimensionality. Uh, the way that we experience money today is more like money on, money off, right? You got it or you don't. In truth, though, we've already been living in a multi-currency economy for quite a while. And I don't just mean like the difference between US dollars and British pounds and the euro. I also mean, loyalty points to your coffee shop or frequent flyer miles. And even, gift cards themselves have kind of become their own currency of sorts. So we're just going to see more movement in that direction. But I also see that we're a future where we're going to have many more of these models that are putting the value of community and of mutual aid and of caring for the environment and shepherding the commons. Those are going to become much more explicit and active as ways that are not just these things that we use on occasion because, hey, that's neat, but things that actually people can rely upon as even primary sources of income. The main reason why we need US dollars is ultimately just to pay our taxes. That's the only real reason why any of us need dollars. You could go live off the grid somewhere and whatever and be totally taken care of, except you still got to pay your taxes. Outside of that, and outside of having to pay for utilities and rent and things like this, there's a lot of room for growth in terms of ways that we can participate in these complementary economies, these parallel economies, and ways that will accelerate our allocation of goods and resources, but also an increase in our standard of living. So I'm really excited to be a part of this shift. I'm really excited to be finding myself coming to help build bridges between these different silos of the barter industry and the community currency industry and the cryptocurrency community. That's particularly exciting. And I'm just loving the thinking that's coming out of programs like platform cooperativism. That whole conference that happened in New York City was very exciting, as well as things like the Democracy Collaborative and the Next System Project. These are the kinds of movements that we need to see more of, and we see more people coming to it, and people are extremely excited about it. And I'm eager to start supporting those kinds of programs and system designs with complementary currencies that are designed to deliver those benefits. Generally, that's what I see happening in the future, and I just I love talking about this stuff. I love doing it. It's a good time.
Well, thanks, Scott. Yeah, we certainly appreciate you sharing with us. I just wanted to comment on, a theme that I'm hearing from you that we see in our other work at Lift Economy of kind of shifting from kind of one mainstream dominant reality to a polyculture of complementary realities that really support diverse ways of doing things, whether it's just financial transactions or it's like you're saying, we can meet our needs with just social capital in a lot of ways, right? And environmental, natural capital through taking care of our ecosystem. And so the more we have these needs met with redundant ways, the more resilient and sustainable our culture is. So I like seeing that pattern being spread through the economic system as well. And for the people listening, is there anything, call to action? What can people do to get involved? Maybe if they, do or do not have a local currency, how can people get involved, learn more, support this movement?
Yeah, sure. They're definitely welcome to check out our website at ithacash.com. That's Ithaca, ITHACASH.com. If people looking for resources, I'd say the best place to go for that is ccia.eu. But generally, people are welcome to reach out to me. I'm pretty much an open book on this stuff. I love talking about it and helping people get things figured out. Keep an eye out for our app that'll be coming out in the next couple of months, or even sooner than that.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.